Okay, welcome back. We're going on to our 7.3 item presentation of Lake County Hiring and Diversity Report for 2022 and consideration of drafting a request for proposal to hire a diversity and inclusion consultant to help develop training, goals, and a plan to improve diversity and inclusion within Lake County's workforce. Human Resources.
Thank you. So in July of 2022, we started advertising with Careers in Government and using Diversity Boost. Diversity Boost automatically distributes to the 8 career boards listed below. And we've observed the following improvements since we started advertising with them. We have increased our Hispanic applicant flow by over 200 over 2021. We hired 17 more Hispanic employees over 2021. Asian Pacific Islander applicant flow decreased by 12, but we hired the same amount of employees in 2022, 10. Black applicant flow decreased by 44 applicants, but we hired 2 more Black applicants over 2021. We increased the American Indian Alaskan Native applicant flow by 199 applicants over 2021 and hired 56 more American Indian Native employees over 2021. So I've shown illustrations for applicant flows for the last 3 years. You can see our applicant flow strongly mirrors our population. But I think using this new job board has increased our flow. I think we'll see greater improvements over the next coming year because this happened right in the middle of COVID. So we had less applicants overall as many people dropped out of the market. In a year and a half ago, we completed inclusion and diversity training with our management team. And I would like to propose that we hire a consultant to increase training, increase goals, and help develop a plan to increase our diversity and inclusion in Lake County. Questions?
Supervisor Spatier.
Thank you for bringing this to us. This is actually a conversation that started prior. I mean, I guess it's been happening for a long time, but I know that I had this conversation with our prior CAO, hence what eventually came out, the diversity, inclusion, and I never know the full title of that committee since I'm not on it, but the committee that's been working on some of these things. And I was always looking for internal change. So I appreciated reading because I was not aware, even though I've had recent conversations regarding this, I was not aware of the changes that had been made to reach out to specific groups to ensure that we had a more diverse candidate pool. That's awesome. That's really good news. I love the numbers that I see. But I also remember seeing the full numbers of our staff, where we stood as far as our demographics in comparison to our communities, and it was not a highlightable situation to brag about at that moment in time. Our staff work hard, they do their part, but diversity is an important factor to make sure that we represent our communities well in our staff. I agree with a portion of this, but disagree with one part. I think there's stuff that we can continue to do that I don't think we should pay somebody to do for us. I think there's some very simple things that we can do. I don't know if we have a policy for a diversity hiring panel. Do we have a policy that ensures that we have a diverse panel that is interviewing to make sure that we're showing diversity, to make sure that we're creating the most welcoming and comfortable of situations for whoever it is we have? I know many other government agencies and colleges have equal opportunity statements that you submit. And I would hate to pay for things that are very kind of obvious that we can do and get accomplished. But there's other parts, like the training, we're not experts in order to develop that, and I think that we do need that. So to me, I'm okay with moving forward, but the details, I want to make sure we're not paying for things. We've had consultants in the past, and I'll just be blatant, where it just seemed like, okay, thank you for sharing with us the obvious stuff that's available for us to do. Everybody in every county in California is working on this stuff, and so I'm sure that we can easily get some information from those counties as far as what they've done and what the results have been, and I would like to make sure that we do those things prior to paying someone else to tell us to do those things, or I don't see that as a good use of our money. So I'm okay with moving forward, but I just needed to make those statements that the details and what we're asking them to do, I think, is important, because I think there's more that we can do. And just a question as far as, and I'm sorry, I keep forgetting the name of the diversity and inclusion committee, but is there a role that committee can play in the future to kind of continuously looking over those policies and providing advisory comments to the board and things like that?
And I think there is. I also think that we need to have key department heads of the bigger hiring opportunities sit on that board. I think a member of HR should sit on that board. But if HR doesn't do the hiring, we do the eligibility, and then the list goes to the department head, and then they hire. So I think unless we develop some clear training and guidelines, and I do remember in our diversity and equity and inclusion training, many managers, lots of things were brought to their attention, and their thing was, okay, what's next? How do we make improvements here? Knowing that in our community is approximately 70% white, how do we make improvements? And I think that's where the coach is here to help us, so that we can start thinking about how to make improvements, but it has to become a goal. It has to be clear direction. And since HR doesn't make the hiring decisions, we have to come together as a management team and say, this is our goal to make these improvements. And I think one of the first things in looking at that is data, is to be able to look at this data. I didn't take our current staff because I can't do anything about who was hired before. But if we start looking at this data and we even break it down by departments, then we can come together. So I do think we need our management team involved with this, and it needs to become part of basic operations, that they start making these considerations, just like we have a veterans preference, and on panels, we give points to veterans. Maybe this is something we should look at for diversity and inclusion. So I think it's a much bigger conversation, and I think we do need a little bit of guidance in setting the bar and then starting to measure and then making changes. And we have opportunities. There's a lot of different departments that are changing right now. This is where maybe we start looking at this. Maybe we look at a recruiter that specializes in equity and diversity, sorry, to help hire on some of these key department heads that are coming up right now.
The committee, though, is public-facing. It's not an internal committee. Supervisor Crandall?
What's that? I'm sorry. It's public, you mean?
Yes, it's a public committee, so it's not looking at our internal practices.
But I know that we've worked with them on a few things where we've looked. You and I, remember, met with some of the facilitators about something.
We did.
Yeah.
I was only briefly on that committee, but it was
No, it was something on, were you on that? You were on that with me, that's right.
for like
Yeah.
a month or
Yeah.
something. But I think it's sort of a different work plan, isn't it? With the goals for the community.
Right.
Rather than looking inside at HR and hiring practices.
Right now, it's basically planning for a forum for I want to say near future. I know the date, or not date, but I know they talked about April and May, but then again, but I do know that working with the facilitators, we're already working with them. I don't know if that's something that we can look at. I mean, I hear what you're saying, it's for the public, but again, I think the two facilitators are knowledgeable in this, and if it can be something that we work on with them on this, it might be something to look at, but the actual forum for it is that of the community. But there's three basically work groups: health, law enforcement, and education. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
But adding to that work plan would be an investment.
Right.
And what were you thinking of for this RFP, for the proposal to be? Is it like what sort of dollar amount, what sort of commitment? Have you kind of thought about that yet?
Yeah, I haven't fully vetted that out. When I was looking at this, I just knew, I felt like we needed some help to take it to the next level. I think this has helped. I think there's a few more job boards that I can also add to this. And in seeing our percentages, then maybe we increase some of our advertising dollars towards some different job boards as well. Because previously, we never spent money on this. And so last year was the first year I said, I'd like some money to work with Careers in Government, which is specialized in our marketplace, but also knowing that they had this diversity boost. And I can see, we're looking at 6 months of data, some improvement. So I think if we increase advertising and increase awareness within our departments, and maybe, part of this has to come as part of the review process. So for each department is develop a report like this for you guys to look at when you're having a conversation with your department heads on where they're at, because we can't change it until we look at it.
Right.
So creating reports and starting to look at it and creating a commitment towards driving diversity, which starts with all of our management team, I think would be helpful. We've pledged this, but I think now we need to have some goals around this and how we can change. Now, obviously, somebody that has 1 or 2 hires a year, may not make a big difference, but in some of our larger departments, by looking at this, we can start driving it. And so I think we have to start with some reporting and then creating goals. It's not going to change overnight. And then making our management team more aware of these goals and how to change mindset. And that's what I need the coach for. So until we put it out to bid, I really don't have an idea of cost. I can touch base with Nicole, who did our diversity and equity and inclusion training for us, because she works with many different organizations doing just this to get some budget figures.
Sorry.
I just wanted to augment what Pam is saying. I think there's 2 paths I can see clearly. One is the outside recruitment and options to draw in a more diverse workforce, but also developing the toolkits for the the department heads and their team, give them those skill sets and training and how to keep that mindset of diversifying their workforce and how to achieve that, and what other options do they have for recruitment, or even developing pipelines from the community college or the high schools as far as diversity. Those are just my thoughts.
I left my pen in.
Okay, let me get to Supervisor Green first. Then we'll get to you and your lotion.
Thank you very much for bringing this forward. Yeah, I don't know how you would scope it. I don't know what the cost would be, but strongly in support of an RFP to start asking these important questions. And although this report kind of focuses on ethnic cultural differences, I want to highlight one of the things that just stands out to this day, and that's and it's not a criticism of anybody. I want to be very clear, not a criticism, but there's gender imbalance in some of our departments that is pretty striking. And I know when we're talking recruiting and retention, any warm body and a vacancy, you take what you get. But that practice, you take a look at an org chart or two in some of our departments, and through nobody's fault, we tend to be falling into some gender stereotypes as far as where people are landing in some of these positions. So. And I think that is a issue that the county has to wrestle with, both in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, but also delivery of services. If we aren't showing appropriate balance in our workforce, but we're dealing with a very diverse community, we're sending subtle little signals when they're seeing people at the front counter in certain occupations, people out in the field in certain occupations. And so I think gender balance among ethnic identification is something this county does need to look at very closely.
Supervisor Crandall?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Supervisor Green, because that's what I was going to basically look at too, is the way we conduct sexual harassment. Maybe that's something we look at as having a diversity type of training as well, because I still need to do it. Actually, I've been given the document, but we have to go through that training and sign off on it. And if we can get to that point of having diversity, equity, inclusion type of training, it kind of gets it on this, not the same level, but you get that rather than going further into having like your concern, having to RFP for someone to come and do that training. We can get to a point of where everyone's watching a video initially, showing that we have some sort of policy or something in place. And I know that that's what this is about. But I just wanted to highlight that because I thought of that, of the training when we were talking about this. So.
And I do think we'll get there, and Vector Solutions has diversity training, but I think the initial kickoff, it's an important conversation that maybe needs to be in person the first time, and then we have this as follow-up training, because you need a seasoned professional to guide the conversation so that conversations don't get emotional or out of hand or go in a direction we don't want them to go. So I do think it's a two-prong approach in having this conversation, but the goals, I think, are more from management. And, if we share this type of report with our department heads as it relates to their department, then they can start thinking about how do I make changes within my own department. But if they don't have raw data to look at, it makes it difficult to start changing that mindset. So first, I think we have to start looking at it. We can't change it until we acknowledge it, until we drive the change.
Supervisor Spatier?
I just want to comment on something CAO Parker said, and I think supervisors should be involved in all future trainings. We deal with the public, and we also hire and deal with personnel issues. And I think that it's important that we do exactly what we would like everyone else to do, because we're not perfect by any means either. So I think that we definitely need to be involved just as much as a department head needs to be involved, and maybe a little bit outside of the scope of the conversation, but I would almost prefer a policy than just specific goals. That way, this is the way you follow the hiring process. That's an HR policy that everyone has to follow, and I just think it needs to eventually be embedded in those types of things.
I also wanted to make a comment. I do have to say that our gender diversity, I was looking just at our senior management team, and it's one of the first places I've been where women executives are on par with men. We're a little over 50% women. So I think we're doing a good job in some areas. Now, I think there are going to be traditional areas you're probably not going to find a lot of women in, working in the sewer or working in water, or it's just traditionally not driven. I looked at that when I was at the city. So, I mean, there are some jobs that are not going to attract certain people. So, but you can certainly reach out to different boards to see if you can attract that. But I think it starts with looking at the data and seeing where we're at and where we want to be.
Okay. Anything from the public? All right, we'll bring it back to the board.
And one last question. In your estimation, do you believe this will be below 25 or above 25,000?
Probably.
Because that makes the difference between coming back to the board or
I
not.
mean, I would think it's going to be at the 25 and above mark.
Because I would ask that, I think we're all interested in enhancing our capabilities to attract more diverse candidates and hire more diverse candidates if they meet the qualifications and whatnot. So I think even if it is under 25, I would like to request that it still come back to the board, because I think we need to continue to talk about it in a more public way than just in a private way.
I'm in agreement with that.
That's just my...
No problem. And I wanted to speak to one more point. You asked about how our hiring boards are comprised. Really, that's set up by the department head. And if you have over 25 applicants now, then you're required to have a hiring board. And the department head sets the hiring board of one internal expert and one external expert. We might have to develop some guidelines there, but it really depends on the makeup of the department, because you might not have a diverse subject matter expert given the makeup of our personnel.
And I think that we can make policies that figure out how to deal with that to ensure a diverse hiring panel. I think that's just as important as what's sitting in the seat of people being interviewed.
Okay. Action?
There's nothing further. I move to approve drafting a request for proposal to hire diversity inclusion consultant to help develop training goals and a plan to improve diversity inclusion within Lake County's workforce, and to bring that RFP back to the board for review and approval.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.